There's a house in Charleston, South Carolina that is only one room wide. From the street, it looks like the narrowest, strangest little sliver of a home you have ever seen. And for 250 years, everyone who ever saw one has been told the same story about why it exists. The city taxed people by how much of their house touched the street. So Charlestonians turned their houses sideways to dodge the bill. It is a great story. Tour guides love it. It shows up in half the articles you'll find online. There's just one problem. It is not true. And once you understand the real reason this house was built the way it was, you will never look at a tiny home the same way again, because in 2026, builders are quietly resurrecting this exact 300-year-old floor plan and putting it on wheels. Before we get into it, hit subscribe so you do not miss where this goes, because by the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly how much a modern Charleston Single Tiny House costs to build in 2026, the real weight you'll be towing down the highway, and a detail about the front door of these homes that almost nobody explains correctly. Stick around for that. It changes how you would actually live in one of these. Let's clear up the tax myth first, because it matters for everything that comes after it, and because architectural historians have been trying to correct this for years with almost no luck against a story that is simply too good to stop repeating. Charleston was founded in the late 1600s on a narrow peninsula between the Ashley and Cooper rivers, under what is known as the Grand Model, the original city plan laid out by the colony's proprietors. That plan divided the peninsula into narrow, deep lots from the very beginning, long before any street frontage tax could have shaped anything. The lots were narrow and deep because that is how you fit the most households onto a small, defensible peninsula. The single house did not appear because of a tax loophole. It appeared because early Charlestonians needed one design that could solve 4 separate problems at the same time. Fit on a skinny lot, survive a subtropical climate with brutal humidity and no air conditioning, provide privacy in a dense urban setting, and signal status, because in colonial Charleston, how you built your house said who you were. The single house solved all 4 problems with one move. Instead of building the house facing the street like almost every other American city, Charlestonians turned the house so its narrow gable end faced the road and ran the long side of the house back into the lot. 1 room wide, 2 rooms per floor, with a central hallway and staircase splitting them. That is where the name comes from. Single house, 1 room wide, as opposed to the wider double house you will also see around the historic district, where the broad face of the home looks straight at the street. Then came the piazza. In Charleston, nobody calls a porch. Almost every single house has a piazza running the full length of the house on the side, not the front. That piazza almost always faces south or west, and that is not decoration, that is engineering. Charleston's prevailing breezes come off the harbor and the Ashley and Cooper rivers, and a south or west facing piazza catches that wind and channels it straight through the house. In summer, the piazza shades the windows from the high midday sun. In winter, when the sun sits lower in the sky, that same porch lets sunlight reach the windows and warm the house. Architectural historians describe it simply. Instead of trying to heat or cool an entire house, you position yourself where the breeze already wants to go. That is passive climate control, done with geometry, 150 years before anyone had a word like HVAC. And here is the detail almost every article skips, and the one I promised you at the top. The door you see facing the street is not the front door. It opens onto a screened piazza entrance. The actual front door is halfway down that side porch, facing sideways into the private side yard, essentially invisible to anyone just walking past on the sidewalk. A visitor has to walk down the piazza before they ever reach the real entrance. That is a privacy buffer built directly into the architecture, a transitional zone between public street and private home, centuries before anyone had a security camera, a video doorbell, or a fence with a keypad. That layout is the whole reason this design is having a moment again in 2026, and I will show you exactly what a tiny version of it costs to build, what it weighs, and what you will need to legally tow it. But first you need to understand why this 300-year-old idea solves a problem tiny house builders still struggle with today. Most legal tiny house trailers in the United States max out around 8.5 feet wide, because that is the standard legal limit for road travel without an oversized permit in almost every state. That means nearly every tiny house on wheels you have ever seen is, by definition, already a narrow single house. The builders just usually do not realize they are echoing 3 centuries of Charleston architecture when they design one. Here is the problem most narrow tiny homes run into. When you're only 8.5 feet wide, every window you cut into that width lets in direct sun with almost no way to control it. You either roast in summer or you black out the windows with curtains and lose the light entirely. The Charleston Single House design already solved this 300 years ago. Put the long run of windows on the side, not the narrow ends, and pair them with a covered porch, a piazza, that shades a glass in summer and lets low winter sun through. Suddenly, a narrow structure stops being a liability and becomes the entire point of the design. A few builders have started doing exactly this, and one in particular has taken it all the way to the name on the listing. Incredible Tiny Homes, based out of Tennessee, literally calls this model the Charleston. It is built on a 10-foot by 30-foot footprint, about 300 square feet, dressed in board and batten or full wood cladding with a 1-floor open layout, a living room, kitchen, bathroom, and a small sleeping loft. As of 2026, pricing on the Charleston runs from $84,900 for the all-wood version up to $99,900 once you move up to LP siding. That is right in line with what other Charleston-style builders are quoting for a similarly sized tiny home with a full kitchen and bathroom. Down in Charleston County itself, builders have leaned even harder into the historic aesthetic, wrapping a 320-square-foot tiny house in cedar plank siding painted verditer blue, Charleston green shutters, window boxes, and an actual piazza-style awning, all inside a home with 2 sleeping lofts and a full kitchen and bathroom. Now let's talk about what it actually takes to legally own and move one of these, because this is where a lot of tiny house content gets vague, and I want you to walk away from this video actually informed. A finished 30-foot Charleston-style tiny house, once you account for siding, appliances, plumbing, and finish work, typically weighs somewhere between 12,000 and 16,000 pounds. To move that legally and safely down the highway, you need a tow vehicle with a gross vehicle weight rating of 14,000 pounds or more, which almost always means a heavy-duty pickup truck, not something you can pull with an SUV or a half-ton. There's also a hard physical constraint that shapes the entire design. In every state, except a small handful, the legal trailer width tops out at 8 feet 6 inches, and the legal height limit sits at 13 feet 6 inches. Both numbers set so the home can clear standard highway bridges and overpasses without needing an oversized load permit. Builders will not exceed that height even if a client asks, because it is not a style choice, it is a road legality issue, and the same standard shapes every single wide tiny house being built in the country right now, whether the builder calls it Charleston style or not. Because every build is customized, from siding and roofing down to plumbing fixtures and cabinetry. Most Charleston County builders tell clients to start the design process 9 to 12 months before their planned move-in date. That timeline has to account for design changes, framing, and finish work, and it is not a number builder's pad to sound impressive. It is genuinely how long a fully custom build takes from first sketch to move in a day. Zoning is its own maze, and if you're picturing yourself building one of these in Charleston itself, this is the part you actually need to understand before you spend $1 on design work. South Carolina has formally adopted IRC Appendix Q, the section of the International Residential Code written specifically to govern tiny houses under 400 square feet. That means tiny homes under that threshold have an actual legal framework to be built to, rather than being treated as some undefined gray area the inspector has to guess about. Inside the city of Charleston specifically, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, are permitted up to 850 square feet, well above the size of most Charleston single tiny homes. But the approval is not automatic. The city requires off-street parking to be provided for the unit, and it requires owner occupancy, meaning the property owner generally has to live on site, either in the main house or the ADU itself, rather than renting out both units as pure investment property. That single requirement rules out a lot of the short-term rental fantasy you see in tiny house content. So if your plan involves buying a lot and renting out a Charleston Single Tiny Home as a pure income property with nobody living on site, you need to check that against current city code before you build, because as of 2026, that is not how Charleston's ADU program is structured. Outside the historic downtown core, the picture changes. West Ashley and James Island carry more flexible zoning than the strict historic district downtown, which is exactly why you see more of these builds concentrated in those areas rather than on the peninsula itself. If the home is on wheels rather than a permanent foundation, it is often still legally treated as a recreational vehicle in South Carolina, which usually means it needs either RV park approval or a special permit rather than falling under the ADU program at all. Financing follows that same split personality. If the home is classified as real property on a permanent foundation, a traditional mortgage can sometimes apply. If it stays on wheels and is treated as a vehicle, you're usually looking at personal loans or RV-style financing instead, which almost always carries a higher interest rate than a conventional mortgage. Now here is the cultural detail that ties this entire design together, and it is bigger than most tiny house videos ever get into. Remember how the piazza ceiling on a real Charleston single house is almost always painted a specific pale blue. Most visitors to Charleston are told it is called haint blue, and that the color is there to repel haints, restless spirits, based on Gullah Geechee spiritual tradition along the South Carolina coast, the belief being that spirits cannot cross water, and the blue tricks them into thinking the porch ceiling is sky or water. That tradition is real, it is well documented, and it carries genuine cultural and spiritual weight within Gullah Geechee heritage. But there is a second, more practical layer almost nobody mentions. Those historic milk and lime-based blue paints often contained lye or slaked lime, and lye is a natural deterrent against mud daubers and wasps building nests in a porch ceiling. Two completely different belief systems, one rooted in Gullah Geechee spiritual tradition and one rooted in practical pest control, landed on the exact same solution, painted onto the exact same ceiling, for two entirely different reasons. That is what makes the single house genuinely remarkable as a piece of design history. It was never just one clever idea. It was dozens of small, layered solutions, structural, cultural, climatic, and social, all stacked into a single narrow footprint, refined by real people living through real Charleston summers for 300 years. When a modern builder puts a version of this on an 8.5-foot wide trailer in 2026, they're not just copying a pretty facade, whether they know it or not. They are inheriting an entire system for how to live comfortably in a small space using nothing but the direction you face, the porch you build, and the color you paint your ceiling. If you are seriously considering a tiny home inspired by this style, the biggest decision is not the siding color or the shutters. It is orientation. A Charleston Single Tiny House only works the way it is supposed to if the long run of windows and the piazza face south or west toward your prevailing wind and afternoon sun. Place the same home wrong on your lot, and you lose the entire passive cooling advantage that made this design last 3 centuries in the first place. That is a 5-minute conversation with your builder before the foundation or trailer position is finalized. And it is the difference between a home that stays comfortable in a low-country summer and one that needs the air conditioner running constantly. The second thing worth double-checking before you commit is which side of the zoning line your land falls on. As we covered, Charleston's zone rules shift dramatically between the historic downtown core, where ADUs are capped at 850 square feet and require owner occupancy and off-street parking, and outlying areas like West Ashley or James Island, where the rules loosen considerably. That single fact can decide whether you need an RV park agreement, a special permit, or nothing extra at all, and it can decide whether your rental income plan is even legal in the first place. And the third thing, the one nobody budgets for. If you're going the wheels route, price out your tow vehicle before you price out your siding. A 12 to 16,000 pound build needs a 14,000 pound GVWR truck to move it legally, and that is not a detail you want to discover after you have already signed a build contract. If you want to see the full walkthrough of what one of these builds looks like inside, from the sleeping loft to the kitchen layout, let me know in the comments and I will put together a full tour breakdown next. And if this kind of research, no sponsors, no fluff, just the real history and the real 2026 numbers, is what you come here for. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.